All right, we're back for A Knight's Tale. Second time is twice as nice, and we're just gonna reuse all the same shit we did last time.
I was
Because
gonna
why
say we're
not?
gonna have the exact same conversation if all goes well.
So let's start how we started before. Mackenzie, this movie, it's a classic tale told with modern music, and we also did Marie Antoinette, which is a classic tale told with modern music. So,
Right.
my cold open question for you is: if you had to take a classic tale or a time period piece and set it to modern-ish music, what time period would you want, and then what kind of music would you go with?
So this is hard because I feel like I would make a lot of similar choices, basically. So, like, I love this genre of music, this era of music in general. I'm a big classic rock girl, like classic rock and jazz. Those are my two faves.
Okay.
So, I would still do like something about classic rock juxtaposed against something modern or a fun historical tale. Like, modern is in like 19th century modern, what would that look like against the jazz age, but like a classic
Hmm.
rock story? Or I think that there's a bunch of really interesting periods in our history.
I also
As an
think that the black community would love it if you took a jazz piece and just laid white rock Americana over top of it.
They'd be like, this bitch, she's the worst. I mean, that's fair. That's fair feedback. I don't know. But yeah, I think there would be a bunch of them. I'm kind of a nerd about, just history stories. I love the idea of like a
Hmm.
Victorian classic story being set against classic rock, kind of like Marie Antoinette did, but definitely a
Okay.
different story. So
Can I ask you, is there a band that didn't make the cut on A Knight's Tale that you would definitely want in your movie? Is there a classic rock band that you'd be like, oh, they have to be on the soundtrack?
yeah, I mean, there's several. Like the first one that pops into my head is Yes, which was my first fun fact, my first favorite band. So it was like
Oh,
this was my very first favorite band. I annoyed the shit out of my entire family by listening to nothing but Yes albums over and over and over for much of my childhood. So I would have to have a good Yes song or two in there. But I
got
also
it.
think there's a bunch of missed opportunities, like a Pink Floyd, like a Beatles, like some
Ooh,
some of
that
the
could have been
greats.
fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. Well,
What about
excellent
you?
choices. For me, I think I would skew toward doing Revolutionary War, like American Revolutionary War, I think is a pretty interesting time
Like
period.
same
Very, very.
music, like classic
Huh?
rock or what? Like same
Oh,
music,
no,
classic
no,
rock.
no. It's going
Okay,
to be
what?
all new metal. All new metal. Like, just Limp Bizkit, Corn, mostly Limp Bizkit, a little bit of Corn, maybe some Linkin Park, but 80% of the soundtrack, well, it's basically just going to be a Limp Bizkit music video for like 90 minutes to 120 minutes if we got the budget.
First of all, I feel like that's an incredible choice. But second of all,
Thank
I
you.
think, you should do, yeah, like an ABBA musical, like they did with Mamma Mia. You know what I mean? Like a Limp Bizkit musical telling of the Revolutionary War. Go.
Yeah, people do not give Limp Bizkit enough credit for how deep their songs are. They have songs about Nookie. They have songs about breaking stuff. They have songs about faith. That's three completely different topics right there. I think we got a movie in the
Wow.
works, Mackenzie. Let's greenlight it.
The depth of it, man. Again, we're just breaking new ground on this pod every week, except for the
Every
weeks where we lose our
goddamn
recording.
week.
But never mind.
Let's do it.
Oh. Alrighty, welcome back to We Drink and We Watch Things. I'm Mackenzie,
I'm Lamar.
and today we are talking A Knight's Tale. Another,
Again.
and again, 2.0, A Knight's Tale 2.0. But what is important is another fan Jan selection, right? So this
Hmm.
is from you guys. And we, as if you have not heard, have turned January into your recommendation month. So it's in honor of you guys, fan Jan, kicking off this week with A Knight's Tale.
And I'm going to ask the question that everyone is afraid to ask, Mackenzie. Is A Knight's Tale a prequel to The Dark Knight?
Is everyone afraid to ask that, or are
I
you
think it's
just
the
afraid to
question
ask
that
that?
America doesn't want to touch.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, it's super not totally
Are
unrelated.
you
I mean,
sure? Because it's got the same guy. It's got the word knight. I understand this one does not have a Batman, but like there's that
mm,
scene where Shannon Sossaman tells him, "Hey, you have to lose all these matches," and he's just up on his horse getting the shit kicked out of him. And I just thought that was a piece that was missing from The Dark Knight, where the Joker could have said, "You want to know how I got these scars? My wife, she put me up on a horse and she told me I had to lose every joust and then I got hit in the face." Like that was not in the movie and I was really disappointed by that, to be honest.
oh
I
my
feel like I'm being
God.
very vulnerable right now.
I mean, your honesty is commendable. But I don't think anyone but you was wondering that. So we're going to move on
Okay,
to
fair.
what are we drinking? Which I don't know about you. Again, we are all aware this is a 2.0. So I did the same thing as my 1.0.
Same.
Did you do? Okay, cool.
Yep.
So what did you do?
So I am trying to get into a little bit of mixology and I am failing stupendously. I tried to remake the same one that I did for Knight's Tale the first time and it ended up tasting like cough syrup because I changed one thing. So
Oof, yeah.
by no means, because I'm making these drinks to try to theme to the movie from here on out, none of you at home have to try and make this because I can't guarantee any of them will taste any good.
No.
This one turned out okay though, so it's black rum, Di Serono, some black walnut bitters, and a little bit of triple sec. And what's the movie that
Nice.
we're doing for the second time called?
For the second, A Knight's Tale?
Yes, this is a knight's cocktail, is what I'm calling this one. So
Wow.
clever,
I
right?
thought for a second you truly forgot, and I didn't realize you were like teeing me up for a pun. I should have known. I should have known. But anyways,
Anytime. How
well,
about you? What are
yeah,
you drinking?
yeah. So, couple things. I went a little easy this time. I agree. Lemar and I have mentioned, I think, way back at the beginning of the pod that we generally wanted to do themed cocktails for you guys, and I got a big old bar, and that's what I was supposed to be doing for Lemar, but life has happened, and sometimes we don't have time to make a cocktail, and sometimes he's not here. So
This is true.
I went with beer this time, but I do think it's super relevant. So the reason being, this is a Czech style black lager.
Okay.
And it is from Schilling Beer Company in New Hampshire. Shout out. This is my boyfriend used to work there and is from there. Anyway, it's an incredible beer, but it's a Czech style black lager, and they filmed this film in the Czech Republic. So I thought it was fitting.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was a fitting choice. And
And
also, of
that was
course,
just like for cheaper budget? Like,
yeah, it's way cheaper to film in Prague. At least it was at the time. It was super cheap to film in the Czech Republic in general, and they're mostly in Prague, and it has a lot of like the architecture that we see. And anyway, we'll get into that. But generally
I
speaking,
love
yes.
improv. It's like yes and yes and yes and. This is going to be such a fun episode because I got to replace all my old jokes with bad puns.
I was going to say, you're coming in hot with the puns this time. You were not on the pun game the previous time, but I am here for it. I'm also here for my koozie, which I'm going to just plug every time. Like, how do I put this around a cocktail next time? Because I need an excuse to use this every time.
You're going to shatter so many glasses. Trying to squeeze them into
like, shove it in there. Skylar, order me new ones. Well, all that to say, we've got our drinks, we've got some puns, we are good to go. So it's time to talk through basics before we give you the spiel about this one, which I am very excited about. I just have to start us off with that. I love this movie and I'm super stoked. So let's get through the perfunctory goodness first. So our writer and director is Brian Helgeland, and you would think that having done this twice now, I could ensure that I had pronounced that correctly, but I have not. Was that right? Okay.
That was correct, yes.
Perfect. So writer-director Brian Helgeland, and he does, some really amazing creative stuff here as far as like, I think this is a really cool script. We'll get into a little bit more detail as to why, like what all the references are and things like that. But he has taken what could be like a basic action flick and turned it into, I think, a really unique story. So mad props to him on the writing of all of this. I mean, I think he does some incredible work, and but I can't remember off the top of my head. Like, what else has he done again? I think you remember, right?
Yeah. So like directing credits, it's not a ton that most people will have heard of. He did do 42, the Jackie Jackie Robinson movie
That's
with
right.
Chadwick
That's right.
Boseman. That's probably the one that most people have seen. He did the Payback movies with Mel Gibson before
Yeah.
we found out that Mel Gibson was terrible.
Yeah.
But mostly he's known for his writing. Like he did
Mhm.
Mystic River, he did LA Confidential, and he did a personal favorite of mine, Man on Fire, with Denzel Washington, which is just the epitome of badassery of Denzel playing it so well. And obviously the script is also great. You get a young Dakota Fanning there too, but personal favorite of mine, and he wrote that.
I mean, anything with Denzel Washington is like by default incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I do love that one. And I really love 42 as well. I mean, I think people know that one, but I don't know how, widely watched that one was. But
I didn't
it's
see it,
also
honestly. Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
I really liked it. I thought it was really well done. And that's an early Chadwick Boseman appearance, rest in peace. He does an incredible job. And that's kind of how I think one of his, major breakthrough roles, really. So it was really good. But
give it a watch.
Well, so he does great work here. Yet again, he's got a few good known credits under his belt, but this is, I think, one of my faves for sure of his. But we'll go ahead and go into the cast and crew, which is incredible. This ensemble is bomb. And it's interesting because it's in the early days of some of these folks. They are not all super well known at this point. Some are definitely known, but not necessarily, hugely famous. This is first one, Heath Ledger. This is his first independent lead role, right? He is the headliner of this one.
Yeah.
And we have him with a mix of some people who are, relatively famous and then others who are pretty new to the scene in general. So Heath Ledger to start, Mark Addy, who is probably most well known for The Full Monty.
I want to have this conversation again because this was so much fun last time where I said, well, I know Mark Addy just as King Robert Baratheon in the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones, the TV series. And
true.
I was like, I've never seen The Full Monty because I don't know if I'm in the target market. I didn't know if it's unisex or if it was primarily aimed at women. Same reason I haven't seen the Magic Mikes, but I hear those are great. So I don't know, Mackenzie, should I watch these movies?
Yes, you should, because I will say again, one, The Full Monty, I think, is just very funny. Like, it's just a comedy. It's very funny. It is mostly, of course, targeted to women because it's about these men who become male strippers. Teaser there. But I think what's more fun about it is a lot of men who watch it can identify with how kind of the secondhand embarrassment, but also humor of what this would be like. So I've watched it with guys who think it's hilarious. First and foremost. But Magic Mike also, again, I did not expect to like that movie. I thought that was going to be exactly what it looks like a joking film, which is, just an excuse for us to go see some eye candy, right? But there was a better story there than I expected. It was actually pretty good. I'm not going to lie.
How much, this could be the thing that seals the deal for me watching this, how much actual magic is in the movie?
100% of actual magic tricks. 100%.
I am on board. Rabbits out of hats and Channing Tatum. Let's go.
Right? Who doesn't want to see Channing Tatum take his shirt off and dance? I think that's his 100% his target market. So yeah, you got those guys to start us off, but then you also have Alan Tudyk or Tudyk. I can't remember how to say his last name. Tudyk?
I always say Tudyk, but you have to say it fast because otherwise it sounds like two dick, and that's inappropriate. So you have to say it really quick. Tudyk.
Really, we just teed y'all up so that we could say Tudyk, to be honest. But yeah, he plays Watt, who is hilarious, and we will get into why. Watt.
Who?
Okay, I can't with this. You're gonna get me every time today. I can feel it. But he is hilarious. We'll get into why he's so funny. He actually improvs a lot of his lines, which is some of my favorite stuff.
This is one of his this is what, his third or fourth, I think, motion picture.
This is his first breakthrough motion picture where he's kind of got a big role. He's had some other supporting roles, definitely, but he's mostly of Broadway fame. So prior to this, mostly known on Broadway more than in films for sure.
It's crazy to think about where he went from here of doing stuff with, Joss Whedon, being on Firefly, but then getting into voice acting. And he's probably in every major animated film that you've seen in the last 10 years.
You're right.
As well as he played the robot in Rogue One, Star Wars. So it's crazy his career trajectory of going from theater to live action to animated. He's killing it.
I think it makes sense. He's so versatile. He
Yeah.
really is. He's versatile, and he's able to kind of really adjust to his settings, his surroundings in these films. And I think he's always really impressive. And he has played quite a range, even in a live capacity. If you look at his Broadway work as well, same thing. So not surprising that he's kicking ass. We love him. Another one that lots of people love, and you will all probably know now, but back then, maybe not as well, is Paul Bettany of Marvel fame, obviously playing Vision
Vision.
in Marvel. But here, he's one of my faves. He plays Mr. Geoffrey Chaucer, which we will get into why that's awesome in a little bit, but he does a real good job.
And he also, I wanted to point out how people sacrificed. I mean, I'm sure that, a lot of times we think that actors and the film industry is more glamorous than it probably is, but a lot of people sacrificed a lot for this. So Paul Bettany actually got laryngitis from the amount that he had to just yell publicly in this thing. That's his whole gig. And the director, Brian Helgeland, actually lost his two front teeth while sort of demoing a stunt with Heath Ledger. They were doing like a jousting thing, and the thing just hit him in the face, and he lost his two front teeth. People are sacrificing all over the place for this movie.
Well, I think for Jeff, aka Paul Bettany, some voice teacher somewhere is telling him, yell from your diaphragm, kid, because you can hear it in this film. You can hear him screaming, and it
shredding
hurts.
his vocal cords.
It hurts to listen to, for sure. Yeah. So we have Paul Bettany. We also have Shannon Sossamon of at least the pod fame, because
of my heart. Shannon Sossamon, straight from my heart.
How many times have we talked about Shannon Sossamon and her lip biting on this podcast already?
She does it like 3 times in this movie. That just every time when I was like 16, 17 years old. So adorable. Okay.
She does. She does do it a lot. It's fine. Janelle, don't listen to this one. But yeah, so no, she does a really good job here. This is the one that I thought was going to like make her famous. You know what I mean? That was going to be like kind of her launch pad. She's definitely done some other stuff, but she didn't kind of blow up the way that I thought, to be honest. She doesn't do a ton after this that's very big,
Yeah, she unfortunately, it seems like was one of those actresses. It's not fair in any capacity, but it just seems like there's a different standard for actresses versus actors of how long your shelf life is and your 15 minutes of fame. And it just seems like a lot of these actresses, they're in everything for 2 to 3 years, and then they vanish. Just, they'll be in a film every couple of years. I do want to say, on the positive side of things, I like that her character of Jocelyn is living her best life, like every day is the fucking Kentucky Derby with her hats and her hair. It looks like she's always going out to the races. And I guess there are horses here, so it works.
She looks incredible every single moment, and she does such fun, creative shit. Like, that's the best part. Is like, again, this is a thing that does not fit the 14th century, which is when this is set. But she has like cool hair dye. She's got purple hair one time. She's got streaks in her hair another time. She's got these awesome outfits, some of which are kind of skimpy for the period, right? But they're so cool looking, and they're to your point, they look like she's going to the Kentucky Derby. It's cohesive. She's got hats and accessories and all that. Anyway, yes, she's so fun. Literally just to watch in this film. She looks great 100% of the time. So she's awesome. Another woman we have joining the cast here that we love is Laura Fraser playing Kate, who is the widowed blacksmith. Bad bitch. Makes the armor. We love her. She's cute and she's funny, and she's got green hair too, which I think is cool.
And I love how she sort of rounds out this group of misfits. I think for its time when this was made, they could have just made it a boys movie, like the guys, blah, blah, blah. But I think that adds to this film overall, just does a very good job of playing to both, I'm not speaking in extremes of like male, female, but it's like, it's got stuff that guys would like. It's got stuff that girls would like. It's got stuff that anybody would like. And I think that having that character as sort of part of the Scooby Gang definitely adds to that.
100%. I think it's a very accessible movie, partially because of that, right? Because it's also not just a Jocelyn, right? Who is a truly very feminine character and actress in this particular film. Kate is a woman, but she's also one of the boys, which is, not something that again, that's very controversial to say these days, but it just like in this context just means she's one of them, right? She just hangs and she gets along with them and she loves it. And she is that girl who loves, to get her hands dirty and get in the nitty gritty. And again, she's a blacksmith, but she can still be a woman. And she even has a line about that later where he's like, are you a blacksmith or a woman? And she's like, sometimes I'm both. And that's, I think, the embodiment of her character. That's why she is so enjoyable.
Yeah, I like that they give her some moments where, yes, she gives a female perspective on when they're
Hmm.
writing the poem and whatnot, and she gets to
Yeah.
chime in, and she's sort of telling them, like, no, don't think this way,
Hmm.
present it this way. This is what. So they never, despite her being sort of tomboyish, for lack of a better term, they never completely take away like who she is as a person, which I kind of dig.
Right. They don't. They don't take her, who away her, femininity or any of those aspects
Mm-hmm.
either, for sure. So another one we have is James Purefoy, who plays Prince Edward, the Black Prince, and he's incredible in this role. Even though he has very few appearances, he's a really cool addition, I think, to the story repeatedly, and he kind of brings it home in a lot of ways that we'll talk through in just a second. And then one that I had to include for almost nostalgic reasons for me is you have Nick Brimble, and he's not super well known, but he plays Sir Ector in this one. So the knight that William learns from, that Will learns from early on as a kid. And he is from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves fame back in the
Oh,
90s.
okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
He played Little John, who's like a really cool character in that story, but also in that version of the film. And anyway, he's great. We love him. But rounding us out is Rufus Sewell, who plays Count Adamar, the asshole. And
He
boy,
just
does
has
this
a hateable
guy,
face.
he
Hateable face.
does. He has such a hateable face, and I feel for him because I'm sure like he must be a lovely man. He keeps getting jobs, right? So people like to work with him to some degree. But man, he has such a hateable face. He's such an annoying character, and yeah, he does a really good job of playing a, misogynistic, egotistical asshole.
Mm-hmm.
He's
Mm-hmm.
pretty terrible. So, I mean, I guess in that sense, he's great because that's what his job is here.
Yeah, it's the Joffrey Baratheon effect of you are so good at being an actor that people want to fucking kill you. They're like, I want that kid to die.
To die.
Yeah, yeah.
Fun fact while we're on that, he briefly, for actually quite a while, retired from acting because of that role, because of the vitriol he received as
Yes,
Joffrey Baratheon.
I
He
had
only
heard that.
recently was in anything. He just was in Sex Education as a very minor character. Totally opposite character, by the way. So go check it out. He's kind of funny in that.
Okay, very cool, very cool. So before we jump into the actual story, and I know we're going to move through it a little quicker than we did last time, just for the sake of time, but
Listen, y'all, you may not have done this before, but we have. So there's only so much we can give.
before we get into the story, I want to touch back on what we mentioned in the intro, because one thing I think we didn't do justice in our first recording was how pivotal the music in this plays out. So speak to, I suppose, why do you think that this is one of the first films I remember doing this, taking this scenario from like long, long ago. And we know this isn't a true story necessarily, but
Mm-hmm.
scoring it with modern music. And I think it's sort of revolutionary, honestly. And also, second question, part B here is, what is your favorite use of music in this film?
Okay, well, that's super easy for me. I'll start there, which is my favorite song in this whole thing is Thin Lizzy's The Boys Are Back in Town. Like
So
that is
perfect.
the moment. That is
Yeah.
the moment in this movie. It's a great fun song. Like I literally got in a fight with Skylar the other day because he skipped it in the car, and I was like, we do not skip this song. So I just love this song, but also it's so fitting in this scene. They are
Yeah.
literally the boys are back in town. They haven't been
Mhm.
home to London in some cases a dozen years, 5 years, 3 years, whatever it is. And so it really is like this beautiful welcome home for them. But they also are coming in with this swagger that
Yeah.
totally vibes with this song of like, we are bad motherfuckers. We have been winning everything. We're coming home. This is our glory ride home. And it's such a vibe. It's the best one in this film, I think.
Very cool.
But yeah, I think this film in general, to your point, is one of the first or definitely major ones, I think, to do this in this way. And to that point, I think it might have been a little ahead of its time in that way. Like, I remember it being something that people saw, but I don't remember it being like a blockbuster, when it came out. I
Yeah.
do remember going to see it in theaters, and I really enjoyed it. And, my family loved it. A few of my friends loved it, but it was by no means something that was ubiquitous, like everyone had seen. And I don't know, I mean, I don't know if you remember that experience yourself, but for me, it was like, it didn't feel like everybody knew this film until pretty recently.
No, I don't know about like pretty recently, but I didn't see the thing until at least 5 years after it came out, maybe 10, because again, I just
Right.
saw the trailers. I don't remember the trailer even representing the fact that it was this cool, sort of hip version of, I
Right.
just saw a jousting movie, right? I was like, I don't really give a
Right.
shit about jousting, so why am I going to go see this? But I think I watched it in like the late aughts, maybe.
Yeah, and I think I should say recently is all relative, right? Like I think in the age of streaming and it becoming more available places is
Okay,
when
yeah,
you
yeah,
started
yeah.
to see it more, but yeah, when it came out not as much. And I think part of that is, and I could be wrong, so nobody hold me to this, but I feel like I remember back then watching trailers for it before I went and saw it, that it looked, to your point, just like a jousting movie, and like it had traditional music set to the trailer. Like it looked
Mm-hmm.
like kind of just a period piece, just an action period piece.
Yeah.
And it didn't have, kind of, if I recall correctly, the trailer didn't have some of that fun music, that fun energy of this is like a
Mm-hmm.
play on this story. And so I don't know that it resonated with people for that reason. They probably saw this and were like, I don't really want to go watch this period jousting movie. And that's like not the vibe of this movie at all.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And but I will add that I guess first of all, it's my fault for asking a two-part question, but I want to backtrack and say
Yes.
my favorite use of music in this is the David Bowie at sort of the dance
The
scene.
golden years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Golden Years because it builds. They sort of start the
Mhm.
dance a little solemnly and then the music
It's
slowly
like the
picks up.
traditional music.
Yeah, and they work their way into it and eventually the beat drops and the actual song comes on. So I
Yes.
really love that use of it. But I also wanted to point out that like this is we talked about during Bring It On how you can if you have a great plot and a great script and a great cast you can make an awesome movie about pretty much anything. Bring It On is the quintessential cheerleading film and I think that
Yeah.
this is the quintessential jousting film. Like a
Oh,
lot of people
100%.
like I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, Lemar, what about the 1995 Robin Williams movie Jumanji? And I'm sorry, but you're wrong. It's not. There's no jousting in that. There is jousting in this. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is number one. Jumanji's number two.
Now I feel like we have to do Jumanji. Okay, guys, after Fan Jan, we'll come back to Jumanji and talk about that. Which actually I do have a lot of strong feelings about, so we definitely should. Anyway, but yeah, I totally agree that that's such a great scene, the golden year scene for sure. I think that's a really good use of the music. And I like that it's the traditional leading into the modern. And like you said, the dance changes, the vibe changes. And the best part of that is that Count Adamar is pissed and he leaves because he's trying to, in that scene, he's trying to embarrass Will and make him look like an
Mm-hmm.
idiot. And it just does not work out in his favor. And that's, again, the best part.
Can we ask? I feel like we're going to jump around the plot a lot today, and I'm fine with that because that's how my brain works anyway. But why does Count Adamar have such a hard on for Will that he is? Why does he give a shit? Like, Will's never seen battle. He's not tested
Yeah.
as Adamar is. Adamar is literally out killing people on the battlefield for part of this film. So,
Right.
why does he give a shit about winning a fake fighting competition as opposed to what he's actually getting paid to do as a mercenary? I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I think that you kind of just answered your own question there a little bit, but I think it's a
Well,
two-part thing, right? It's partially that he is a mercenary, not a real soldier in that sense, right? He's a paid mercenary. So it's not like he's operating in some sort of heroic method in service of the crown in your traditional
mm,
sense, right? It's not like his majesty's army or whatever. He's a mercenary. This is his business. And this is the free companies were a mercenary company that was actually very well known for being kind of terrible. And they eventually, and they actually allude to it in this film, they eventually disband them because they were known for raping, pillaging, torching towns, like, and just razing towns to the ground that were not essentially in their remit to do. So
yeah.
he is definitely a mercenary, but he's also just kind of evil. Like he doesn't care how his soldiers behave. He doesn't care that they're doing something wrong. He even makes an allusion to it when he comes back and they're literally talking shit about him. And he's like committing the oldest of sins and the newest of ways. And he's like fucking proud of it, you know? So
Mm,
one, he's a fucking creep. Two, I think he also, it doesn't, none of that matters. This is, yes, fake jousting and a fake, trophy and all this shit, but it is a status symbol. And the point is, for him, it's a hierarchical status symbol, and he should be at the top because he's the wealthiest, or he's the most successful, or he's the guy with the smallest dick and he's got a lot more to prove. I don't know. But I think it's more of a status thing than anything else. And it's this entitlement to, you're this poor country knight. As far as he can tell, especially when they first meet, Will is this poorer knight. Yes, he's a knight, but he's poorer. He's obviously doesn't have the same access or title in the same way. Again, a count and a knight are very different, right? A count and a sir are really different in the caste system here. So he feels superior. And in what world should he lose? Right. And it's a great allusion to another really great film, but also a book, The Count of Monte Cristo, where they are best friends. They have this big falling out. And he says, because in what world should I want to be you? Right. I'm the superior guy. And in this world, I am not supposed to want to be you. So I think that's what Adamar's battling this whole time.
I'm going to save that line in case I ever have a fight with my best friend or my brother. That's really fucking hurtful. I don't know if I remember that line, but I was going to say, I wonder also if Jocelyn weren't a factor in this, if he would be as hard up about it, because I think that part of it, maybe it's also him being a mercenary, of feeling like he's owed something, or by winning this, he should be able to pick any lady that he wants. Maybe that's part of it as well. But I can't forget the scene where he's literally at war. He's out there in the barracks or whatever you want to call it, and he's fighting for his life every day. But they hand him the tournament papers of who's winning, and he's like, yeah, this guy's winning all the fake fights, and he's just so mad. He's like, stabs the paper. I'm like, what the fuck, Adamar? Like, focus on what's important.
But I love that scene too, because it's so funny. I made Skylar rewatch this with me when we did this, and he said the exact same thing. He was like, why is he paying attention to this in the middle of battle? And I was like, bitch, if you think our soldiers overseas are not checking football scores, you are wrong, right? Like, they care about these fake fights just as much as the others. But the other thing I think, honestly, is this is insert dude here, right? This is a dick measuring competition, right? It doesn't matter if it's Will, it's going to be somebody else. Whoever is the other threat, the best threat on the field, I think becomes Adamar's nemesis, regardless of who it is.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad we got past that asshole. I want to backtrack to sort of the beginning of the story, because one thing that I want to shout out at the beginning is I love that it throws you directly into what the conflict and the story of this is going to be. And we get the music piece with Queen. You see the crowd there, and it just throws you right into this universe. I also love that as soon as the movie starts, the knight that Will is going to be replacing has already died and shit his pants.
He's literally dead.
Ready to go.
You were in the thick of it from minute one, for sure. And it's hilarious from minute one. I think that's the other thing to really call out here, is it's so funny from the first moment. And Watt's over there trying to fucking kick Sir Ector's armor, like, hey, wake up. And he's literally dead, guys. He's dead. But yeah, I love that you're in the thick of it, and they're standing there trying to figure out what to do. And, they say it right there at the beginning, like, the landscape is food. Right? They are all starving. They haven't eaten in 3 days. They need Sir Ector to win this joust, or they're not going to eat. Right? And they don't have another method, at least at this moment, to make money and get food and blah, blah, blah. And so this is a critical juncture for them. And that's where Will decides, seemingly just in this moment and temporarily, to pretend to be Sir Ector and go joust, because all he has to do is not what, Lemar?
Not get knocked off the horse.
Don't fall off the horse, and that's it. We win, which doesn't feel like a big ask, right? So they commit and they do it, but even that whole interaction is hilarious. You've got like Heath Ledger with his messy ass dreads, and they're stuffing him into this armor that doesn't fit, and thank God he doesn't fall off the horse because they win. But also extra thank God that the shield gets hammered to his head as a result, because then he can't take off his helmet and like show who he is. Because I have wondered what they were gonna do if that didn't happen. Like, were you just not gonna take his helmet off? I don't know, but it works out great.
I really like how when he doesn't get knocked off the horse, but he gets fucking railed by this,
he gets rammed,
lance. And like, he is basically dead on his feet, but he's on the horse, and they're just celebrating like, oh, we didn't lose because he didn't fall off. But meanwhile, he's probably got a concussion. This is before concussions were a thing.
For sure he's got a concussion. And he's like, don't get so excited, and he's, but they're like, this is his first moment where he has, quote, won one of these things. It's not supposed to be first director for sure. And they say that again later when he breaks a lance, he breaks a lance on somebody and they're like, director's broken thousands of lances. And he's like, I haven't. This is awesome. So I mean, it's a huge moment. And I think the good and bad of it is this is the moment he realizes he can get away with this. And it shifts the whole story from there. And it's really cool because they get their prize, they get their money. Everyone else wants to go home to England and just buy some fucking, fancy cakes and peppermint cream, says Watt.
Well, because the dream of a full stomach can come true. I like that Watt just aims low. He's like, I could be eating right now. Yeah.
Right.
Dream
He's
big,
like,
kids.
Food is possible. I can't change my stars. I don't know what kind of nonsense you're talking about, but I can, in fact, eat today. And I think that's a cool moment for them where you see their camaraderie right away, right then, even in that early scene, that dynamic of, they love each other. Like they're literally fighting and Will is trying to literally take their money to go outfit himself to joust and do all this shit. And they're fighting over it, but ultimately they trust him and they love him and they will do what he asks. And I think this is actually something that lends itself to going back to the production of this film, which is they really kind of had built this dynamic among the cast in this really truly organic way. So I said at the top, they shot in Prague, and Prague is so cheap to shoot in that Heath Ledger had to be there a little bit earlier with the director, Brian, and the other folks didn't have nearly as much to do, but it was so cheap that Brian calls everybody out and is like, come fucking hang, man. Like, just hang with us while we do all our prep. And they did. They had like an afternoon of prep, the other guys. And then the rest of the time, they're just hanging out with Heath and the rest of the crew and they're bonding. And they were literally going out drinking and hanging out and getting to know each other for weeks at a time. And I think that dynamic of this band of misfits who really are close and good friends and love each other comes through the whole film. And I think that had a lot to do with it, right? Like they literally just hung out in the Czech Republic and had some drinks and got to know each other and became like real friends.
Yeah, I would imagine that this would be a really fun set to be on. So that tracks for me. How much, this is changing the conversation a little bit. You mentioned Heath's dreadlocks and his long beard at the beginning of this. Throughout this movie, I asked myself a few times, how much of Chris Hemsworth's Thor character was based on Heath Ledger in A Knight's Tale, because he's got, when we see Fat Thor eventually, spoiler, he's got the dreads, he's got the long beard, but we also like his lovable idiocy at times, when Will is trying to talk to Jocelyn and says, your throat is above your breasts. Like that, the way he delivers that is so Chris Hemsworth as Thor, just this lovable idiot.
Well, it's funny you say that because they are both Australian dudes who are, slowly became famous actors. And yeah, I don't know. And maybe it's that Australian humor. Maybe it's that Hemsworth admired Heath Ledger and had seen him, because obviously Heath Ledger was famous quite a bit before Chris Hemsworth. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this was like a vibe that they were trying to emulate. This was not like a blockbuster. I don't think a lot of people would elude that, but I think that's a good catch. They do have a similar energy. Also, Fat Thor weirded me out so hard. Such a weird vibe. Just while we're on it.
Speaking of Jocelyn, though, I want
to
say
we got to talk about her.
Yeah, I want to call out that one of my very first notes as I was watching this was Will falls in love with girl with stupidest hat, because she has that dumbass white bonnet without straight. I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's not doing her any favors.
Well, okay, so this is where I'll nerd a little on behalf of the people of this time. Well, one, I totally agree with you though. Like
they're not offended; they're not around anymore. You don't need to speak on their behalf.
I'm not. I didn't say they would be offended. I'm just here to help. You know what I mean? I'm just here to help the people of the past. But anyway, I agree with you. Number one, that it is the worst outfit she wears in the whole movie. Okay, like bar none. She looks the least flattering here. Like her hair is completely up in a bonnet, and I think one of her assets in this film and as a person is her hair, and they don't show it off. And she's supposed to be like this Venus. He even says that later, this Venus, this goddess to him. And I just feel like at a first glance, if that really was your first interaction with her, would that really be your takeaway? It's just not the most flattering. I would totally agree. But secondarily, hat wise, bonnet wise, whatever, you do see that kind of hat on women a lot in this time period. And it is not
Mhm.
flattering. Oftentimes it covers your ears. Take a picture of any picture of Anne Boleyn, this is the hat that she's wearing. Like, I think most people have seen some picture of Anne Boleyn in a movie, in a film, or in a piece of art somewhere at some point. Anne Boleyn, the beheaded wife of King Henry VIII, she is wearing this hat, right? And it is a recurring style at the time. And no, it is not flattering. It's not flattering on anybody.
It's a bonnet with sideburns, is what it is.
It is. That's an excellent description. It is
Thank
a bonnet
you.
with sideburns, and it doesn't look good on anyone. I would hate to wear it. My hair is the only thing I got going for me. You know what I mean?
You stop. You stop fishing for compliments on this podcast.
He's like, because I'm not going to get them.
It's not my style.
But Jocelyn, okay, so we have to talk about their first interaction, though, I gotta say, because, you know, he has literally only seen her. He's seen her for 2 seconds, and he's just fucking infatuated. And I think that's my question to you is, should he legitimately be infatuated with her in 0.2 seconds? Like, what is, she hasn't said anything
not
that
in that hat.
yet.
That's what I don't understand the directing here of, oh yeah, here's your outfit for today, Miss Sossaman. This is when he falls in love with you for the first time. And really? Like, if I were her, I would have had notes, honestly. So I don't
probably
know.
went to the costume designer and was like, are we sure he's in love with me, or I'm going to a nunnery? Like, what's happening?
I think that there was just, and you're more into cinema than I am, and you could speak more to history, but I think that we've wizened up in the last couple decades of what constitutes, you know, we won't buy into just a traditional meet cute anymore unless it's a Hallmark movie, basically, that crowd. But the rest of us, I think we require a little more subtlety and storytelling to see people fall in love, and this is just from a time before that existed where it's just like, yep, we'll buy into that, fuck it.
Because I do remember, like, in retrospect, just the nostalgia of this film and, like, thinking about watching it the first time. I don't think I questioned that at all. You know what I mean? I mean, I do remember feeling like this isn't her best look for sure, but I don't feel like he didn't fall in love with her, right? But I do think it's fun that he goes into the church and follows her, and he gets screamed at, you know, you desecrate the house of God. And it's incredible and hilarious, and it's a beautiful echo, actually. It sounds incredible. But yeah, it's kind of begins his pursuit of her and trying to understand and find out who she is. And he, spoiler alert, does eventually find out. She does eventually really think that he's the one. She has no interest, by the way, in Count Adhemar, but it has to be said. Yeah. She has a lot of fun fucking with everyone. I think, around her. She does, like, she likes to kind of have the witty repartee with Count Adhemar, because she's like, I think she loves that he doesn't want to hear her speak, because she even says that later. She's like, Adhemar wants his women silent, and she, like, forces him to listen to her. And I think that's her exerting some sort of power at this time where a lot of women don't have much power. And so I think she has fun with that. But she is a character. It can't be overlooked that she has a lot of autonomy, a lot of freedom for a woman of this period. And it frankly makes no sense, right? Like, historically speaking, would not happen, right? She's traveling all over. She's going to all these jousts unchaperoned, other than with her lady in waiting. She's speaking unchaperoned with Adhemar. Even there would always be somebody there, and same thing with Will, and so on and so forth. So she's actually a really empowering, interesting character in that way. Like, she has a lot of freedom here.
So, ladies, if you ever make a time machine, don't go back to medieval times thinking it's going to be this fun. You will not have a great time.
No.
Do you think there was a moment that stood out to me, and we didn't talk about this last time, but when she's talking to Adhemar, and I think she's I don't know if Will is down there jousting at that point, but they're watching the jousting. He's sitting up there, and she basically asks him to mansplain the sport to her. Is she just fucking with him there, or is that legitimately her being curious about it?
No, there's a couple motions that she makes, and they're kind of mannerisms that tell me personally that she genuinely doesn't know the answer.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Like, I think she genuinely is like, hey, explain this to me. But what I like about it is that once she knows it, she gets enraptured, right? Like, I think it's the same thing with, you know, as soon as you get into a new sport, any sport, if you get into football, for example, and you didn't know, all of a sudden it is so much more interesting to watch, right? And so she has that moment, I think, with jousting, where she genuinely hasn't cared about this up to this point, and he does explain to her a couple of key things, and she's like, oh, okay, I get it now. you know?
Okay. So it's kind of like what the first time you hear Dave Matthews Band and then you follow them around show to show, city to city. Like that's what, because that's what she ends up doing is just all these people are like Fish or Dave Matthews fans going all around the country with these guys that are jousting.
I mean, I'd go Grateful Dead, but yes, literally exactly the same thing. For sure. Yeah, and I think that's it. Again, I think it speaks to her freedom as a character in all seriousness, like that she gets to do that. She has this ability to do that. But we gotta. So Jocelyn's a huge character that we love, but we gotta. I can't let this pass. We gotta talk about Chaucer. And really the whole misfit band of misfits are all incredible, but I think Chaucer is so important because really this is kind of a loose framework of this film. So when I talk about Brian Helgeland doing a really creative thing with the writing of this screenplay, this is kind of what I'm talking about, and this is where, you know, we get to nerd out about it. This is somewhat not exact framework, but this is somewhat loosely inspired by the Canterbury Tales and Geoffrey Chaucer, right? So those of you who don't know, Geoffrey Chaucer was an incredible writer in this period. He wrote, again, the Canterbury Tales, but he wrote other things as well. And at this time, he's like the one show in town. You know what I mean? It's him and the Gutenberg Bible, right? Like there's not a lot else out as far as what is published works. So I love that when we first meet him, he's trudging through, he is naked AF, and you don't really know why, but he is like, he's not, he doesn't look diminished in any way. He is confidently,
This is just my life.
This is just my life. He's just walking forward naked AF and just like, listen, this is who I am, like as a person. It's fine. And he has this incredible interaction with them right away. I love how he introduces himself. Lilium interspecitus, the lily among the thorns. Geoffrey Chaucer's the name, writing's the game. And then he tries to explain that he wrote this work, the Book of the Duchess. And he's like waiting for the fangirling to start to happen from them, but they don't read, like they don't know any of this, so they're just like, blank, what, like what do you mean? And he's like, okay, well, you know, it was allegorical. They don't know what that means. They don't get any of this entire conversation, and it's my favorite part about it because he's just talking. These are not his people, right? Like this is not his audience, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, the crossover between this and the actual Canterbury Tales is quite interesting. When you know, I am not smart enough to know all these things, but I got Google going for me. So it was interesting to find out that, you know, there was a year where historians can't really trace where Chaucer was at that given time, and that's where this film is set. Is, hey, what if he went on sort of this gambling thing and he became a nudist? No, that's not really, that's just one scene. But what if he, you know, went on this bad run, but then joined up with this knight, and that's what inspired the Canterbury Tales? Wouldn't that be cool? So that's sort of the basis for this. And actually it ties into the Canterbury Tales, because if you've read that, the very first story in that is called The Knight's Tale. So there you go.
Well, and it's also, it is in potentially loosely based off a real knight of this period and like his situation of jousting. And historically this time, something to understand is like, he says it something in this movie that I think alludes to it a lot, where it's basically talking about how did the nobles become noble anyway? They took it with the tip of a sword, right? And I'll do it with a lance, right? And this is very true at this time. Like knighthood is changing, royalty is changing, nobility is changing. People are being awarded lands and knighthoods because of loyalty rather than birth, right? So this is actually very true of this period, that changes quite quickly. And so there is actually an earl of this time, I can't remember his name, who this is potentially loosely based off how he became noble in this period as well. So there's I just think it's such a cool framework for, what was Chaucer up to for this weird year of his life? And he was unusually well tracked. Again, he was famous. Like a lot of people, there's a lot of things happening to people at this period and nobody has any idea what's going on. But for his time period, he was very famous. So it is weird that he like fell off the face of the map for a year. And I think it's such a cool idea that this is what he was doing. He was being a herald for a random knight who's actually not even really a knight. And he did such a great job of it. All the SAT words.
Yeah, and I like that it's, you know, he's not the main character of this. They could have said, oh, we're going to make a movie about Chaucer in this time, but he's, you know, he's one of the main
he's
cast.
A supporting
but
cast.
It's not, the focus is not on him the whole movie.
100%. And I like that he does get these vignettes though that are very much about him. Like he has this gambling problem, as we know. It's how he loses his clothes. It's how he gets indebted to William, and he immediately falls back into it when they get to Ruin at the joust at Ruin, and he loses his clothes again and all this stuff. And so, but the people there who are holding him hostage and expecting this money from Will are two characters in the Canterbury Tales, and they're two of the most hated characters in the Canterbury Tales. And if you don't know that story, it's essentially a group of kind of misfits traveling to a cathedral in Canterbury, and they're trying to go reach a relic, and I won't get into all of that. But anyway, they're traveling together, and the Canterbury Tales are them telling one another stories. They're all telling a story on these travels. And two of the folks who do this are the Summoner, and in this film, Simon the Summoner, and the Pardoner, which is Peter the Pardoner. And those are the two people who are holding Chaucer hostage and expecting him to pay these gambling debts. And they so fit the character from Canterbury Tales. And I love Chaucer's line to them where he's like, I will eviscerate you in fiction. I was naked for a day, but you will be naked for eternity. And it's true. We still read this book to this day, and they are terrible, horrible characters, and you hate them. So I had to go on about that. I love that so much.
No, I love it when you nerd out. I'm on board. Let me nerd out. Have you ever heard of Nike shoes? Nike, the sneaker company? Because that's what I know. So
yes, hit me.
So in this, we get the very blatant product placement of the Nike swoosh logo there on the armor. And did you know what Nike's founder's name is?
No, I don't know the founder. I know the goddess Nike, but what about the shoe company? Go ahead.
Well, the founder's name is Phil Knight. So it's all coming full circle here today, is what I'm saying.
That is so poetic. Well, and again, Nike, so, and I think this is also probably a very intentional use of this, Nike was a goddess of victory. So, he does eventually
win. Slam dunks.
Yeah, and slam dunks. Obviously, victory equals slam dunks. Like, those are the same, right? So,
Can I ask you, as someone, I know that you really, really love this movie. Can I be a little critical and ask you a question really quick?
I mean, you can ask me a question. I didn't say you could be critical, but, whatever.
It's like, don't get mad. I know you're going to get mad. Did this movie need to be 2 hours and 12 minutes long to tell the story that it tells? Because that's one of the on rewatch things that I struggle with A Knight's Tale is I just think it's a little too long.
Okay. Well, it's okay to be wrong. Everybody is sometimes. In this case, today's your day. No, I think it's great. I honestly, I was thinking about this when we talked about this. I don't feel like it drags for me. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, of course, does any movie have to be 2.5 hours long or 2 hours and 12 minutes or whatever? It all depends on how you feel while you're watching it, I think, generally speaking. And I didn't feel like it dragged. I guess my question back to you would be, where do you feel like they had opportunity to cut? Where should they have let some of it go?
Up until I think the last flashback, or when the flashbacks all tie into modern day, they made a lot more sense to me. But while watching, I was just like, I don't understand why some of the scenes were there. And they did go on a little long. There's a couple scenes, the very first scene where they meet in the church, I think drags a little bit when he walks the horse in there. And then there's another scene when...
It's pretty hard to get a horse back out of a church. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to take a minute.
Can I finish? God, what is this, Fox News? So you asked me a question. The other one was going to be the other church scene where after Will writes her the poem and he goes in and she's trying to call him out on it of say these beautiful things that you said in this letter that you wrote me.
Yeah.
That scene is just, for what they're trying to convey there, it is really long. And then there's one other one, which is when they're telling him to run when he gets found out as not being who he says he is. And they're all telling him to run for fucking like 15 minutes. So it's just like, okay, we get it. He needs to run. He doesn't want to run, but it goes on and on and on.
Okay, I addressed the horse one already. My apologies for interrupting.
I apologize for
Uh,
the horse one. That I was in the wrong.
False, false. Okay, but number two, the cathedral one. I guess I can. Again, I'm trying to like kind of piece this together. I feel like maybe that was a little long, but there's some key moments there that I love, and that's why maybe that's why I love that scene and I overlook that because I love where the deacon or one of the church people comes over and yells at her and shushes her, and they're
Mm-hmm.
fighting. They're fighting loudly as we know, but he shushes her and she just calls him the fuck out. She's like, do not shush
Mm-hmm.
me and spare him. Be gone, go. And she yells at him, and I fucking love it because it's deserved. So maybe that's why I don't notice that as much, but I do think it's where she throws down this really important challenge from a plot perspective of she's like, you have
Mm-hmm.
to lose to prove your love. And I agree with her. Like all these other knights and people, and him included, offering to win the tournament in her name is
Mm-hmm.
bullshit, right? It's not for her. It's just a cherry on top that they get to say that, and maybe they get credit for her or whatever. It's
Yeah.
not. I don't think it's of value to her, and it's not for her. So I agree with the crux of the scene, which is why maybe I think it doesn't bother me. Now, that being said, the third one, the run scene that you mentioned, I agree. That does go on a little long. And I think the reason that goes on a little long for me personally is logistically, how realistic is this? They're like
Mm-hmm.
out in the open having this chat, and they're talking about how they're coming to get him and they're going to arrest him and all this shit. And it's like, there's no way that somebody hasn't found them by now. Because you're right. This conversation is going on for a while. Prior to her walking up, they had no reason to be in hiding. They weren't like tucked away somewhere. To our knowledge, they're in a perfectly normal area to just get ready for this event. And no one has found them yet, but they're actively looking for him to arrest him.
Yeah.
It felt improbable that they were not found during that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, agree to disagree. We don't have to, there doesn't have to be a right or a wrong, but you're going to think I'm wrong no matter what. Let's get to something that we agree on, which is the scene where they write the poem itself and what we just spoke
Yeah.
about of
We yeah.
he's getting his buddies to ghostwrite a poem. And this is long before hip hop, everybody. This is at least 100 years before hip hop existed. So, back then, this is what ghostwriting looked like.
Yeah. No, I love this scene. I agree. And yes, we have had this conversation before, but I will just reiterate. I think this is beautiful. I think he also, side note, doesn't get enough credit from Jocelyn in that other scene for being poetic because he's not ready to riff it out right then. Like,
Yeah.
how many times do we get asked to do something on the fly and we're not ready?
Yeah, not every good rapper can freestyle, Jocelyn,
Right. Sometimes we got to write, we got to work in advance. But he says very naturally throughout the film to her and in this letter and in other contexts away from her, but talking about her, very poetic things, right? He does have that kind of natural poetic tendency. And I think those feelings are sincere and they are there. So that's where I don't think that's entirely fair of her. But I do think he begins this letter in a really beautiful way, and it comes from a sincere sentiment, and it is another, I think, sort of a harkening back to the Canterbury Tales too, where everyone is contributing to the story, everyone is contributing to the letter, and they all have something really beautiful to add to it, I think.
Yeah, like everyone has a story of a time that they had a broken heart and they all get a chance to contribute. I
Yeah.
will say that it always makes me, I always forget the line where they're getting ready to sit down and write this, and Watt's immediate response is, say something about her breasts. And then
Yeah.
Roland says, like, yeah, tell her you miss her breasts. Like, that's what every girl dreams of hearing, right? But I love that, again, playing to what we said earlier about the Kate character and how great she is she immediately throws shade of, like, her breasts were not that impressive. And I love that line as well.
She's like, listen, if you're going to compliment something, it's not that. It's not that.
Right.
Which she's not wrong, fair feedback. Move on. Let's do something better. No, I agree. I think that they all contribute something really beautiful. And yeah, when they make the breast comment, he's like, Geoffrey Chaucer's like, maybe I think higher than her breasts. And he's like, what, her throat? Like, but so it's just full of fun little gems like that. But I think it ends on a really positive note. And I think it's cool that Chaucer, while he is the poetic one, both in this film and outside of it, doesn't write the whole letter. He's kind of just being the scribe, really, which is, I think, a fun backseat for him to take in this context. And I think it speaks to how regular people are also poetic and also have these beautiful stories to tell.
Yeah. What else do you want to touch on here?
I do
As
want to
far
talk
as scenes that stand out to you.
Yeah, I do want to talk briefly about Prince Edward and the dynamic that Will and
Mm-hmm.
Edward get, because I think that's a
Yeah.
really another beautiful part of this film, and a really cool bromance that begins. And how it begins is, I think, really neat. Where, way back when he's first jousting pretty early on, he jousts against Prince Edward, who he doesn't know at that time is Prince Edward, and he essentially he gets injured, and so it turns into a draw, and he lets him treat it as a draw rather than defeating him. And it's kind of this graceful mercy for Edward's character, who he's pretending to be Colville at this time. And so they have this mutual respect right away of like, I don't need to shame you to
Yeah.
win. I still get to move forward, and I don't have to hurt you or shame you. And that, for example, is something that Adamar would never do, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
in another joust, they find out it's Edward. They figure out that Colville is Edward. Everyone else withdraws because you can't willingly endanger a member of the royal family, as they say. And and Will's response is he willingly endangers himself. Like, let's fucking go. He wants to joust.
Yeah.
This is his choice. And so instead of withdrawing the way everyone wants him to, including his own team, he goes up against him, and you just see Edward's face light up, and he screams Lance in this way where he's just so fucking excited to go and that somebody
Yeah.
will fight him. I think it's just such a cool moment of them being like, they're the same type of person.
Yes.
They're both pretending that they to be something they're not, and he says that later.
Mm-hmm.
What a pair we make, huh? We're both trying to hide, and we're both unable to do so. They both want to be somebody that they're not because of their rank, because of their station. They are limited
Mm-hmm.
in some way, and they come together and they become friends, and ultimately changes the course of Will's life. Right? He knights
Yeah.
him later, and I don't care what anybody says, and it's cheesy. I'd tear up in that scene every time. Like, he
Yeah.
knights him, and it's glorious, I think.
Yeah. I'm on board with that. I think that for as few scenes as Prince Edward has in this film, it's crazy how pivotal he is to how it all plays
Mm-hmm.
out,
Mm-hmm.
because we've spoken before about how, Will, no matter how much he believes in his heart that he is a knight, the papers don't say he is. So
Yep.
no matter how brave and courageous and how he goes into battling, he never drops his head. He has all this going for him, but the paperwork won't agree. So
Yeah.
the fact that he earns the respect of this guy who also just wants to compete, then that circles back at the end and gives him his opportunity to become Sir William, which
Mm-hmm.
is really cool to hear.
Yeah, I think that's such a pivotal moment to your point of, he says something else to him. He's like, your men love you, and if I knew nothing else about you, that would be enough. And it inspires him to knight him. And I love the like, he's like, my historians have found that he is of, an ancient noble line, and don't argue with me, bitch, is basically the translation of the rest of that. And he knights him there, and it's beautiful and it's romantic in this glorious way. And he is again, a pivotal character to your point, but he's there for such a short period of time. You don't expect him to be so important. And he's who allows, Will's father to come see him, at this joust and hear him as
Mm-hmm.
Sir William Thatcher. And
That
that
moment
is,
gets me.
and Watt tells him, he's like, your father heard that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the clutch my chest. I'm so emotional. I'm verklempt. Talk amongst yourself. Talk amongst yourselves.
I also feel kind of bad because I know James Purefoy is, I believe, still acting to this day and has done so much stuff, but I forget that he's in this all the time, and I will always just remember him for the first Resident Evil movie, which was kind of the only good one, some bad CGI aside. And also, to bring things full circle for us, fully new metal soundtrack. So there you go. You get your tie-in from the beginning
There
of the
you
episode.
go.
Banger soundtrack as well.
You know what's funny? I always think of him from this TV show that I don't think had a huge, fandom necessarily, but it was a really strong first season. I thought it was called The Following. And it was like, he plays a really weird, creepy character, but he does it really well. And it's a really interesting series, but it didn't last very long. But I always remember him from that. I can just picture him as that. He's also in Sex Education. Second Sex Education
Okay,
reference
so
on the pod today. Yeah.
lots of Knight's Tale alum in there,
Yeah.
or at least
Apparently
two, I
so.
guess.
Apparently so. But I mean, I think all that to say, it's easy for me to say, like, we love this movie. Obviously, we talked about it twice now for over an hour, but I say we love this movie. Maybe that's not a fair assessment. So going into our ratings, what would you rate this as we wrap this up?
I really, really like this movie. I'm not going to go as far as to say I love this movie. I do find it enjoyable, but I think I had just rewatched this already maybe a year or two ago, but I wanted to rewatch it for the pod, and I did find it harder to get through this time, despite it being enjoyable. I think the length, it suffers a little bit for me, but I would still say, like, probably a 7.5. Like, I think it's very, very good, but it's not going to be in my pantheon of great films for me personally.
Okay, well, I have to say again, it's okay to be wrong. No, I'm kidding. It's your time to be the Russian judge. We got to alternate once in a while, apparently.
Yeah.
But no, I love this movie. I just think it's a little bit nostalgia, but it's also just, this is one of those that is very enjoyable for me to watch. It has the nostalgia factor. It has a killer cast. It's got a killer soundtrack. I'm a sucker for a killer soundtrack. And I could watch it over and over and over, to be honest. And I think so in that sense, it's such a high marker for me. I think it's like a 9. It's like a solid 9 out of 10 for me, like an 8.5 or a 9 up in there. Cause again, I feel like I could just watch it over and over, and so quotable to me. It's so, and I love, again, listening to soundtrack. I'm here for it.
Oh, also, as the Russian judge, I deducted like half a point. Why did they make his colors like the ugliest shade of lime green? Like, why did I have to see that on my screen for half the movie?
What is with you boys and being colorblind? It's not lime green. It's just green. Like, I have this conversation with Skylar all the time too, where he gets colors wrong. It's not
say, how many boys do you know that are colorblind? Because you've made that seem like it is
a largely male thing. Look it up. Men are more colorblind than women.
All right.
And it's not lime green, but I like, well, I'm wearing black right now and you can't tell, but I have greenish olive colored pants on. So for me, I love green and black. So I was here for it. I was like, these are great colors. What are you talking about? Okay. Well, y'all, if you couldn't tell, we think this is worth a watch, is the point.
Absolutely. Yes. Watch this film. If you've never seen it, absolutely. Why did you sit through this whole episode?
I would be shocked, but maybe.
If you haven't watched it recently, give it a rewatch. It's still very, very fun. And I think, enjoyment will be, like I said a couple weeks ago, if it's between a 6 and a 9, it is a movie worth watching and rewatching 100%. Because, maybe your opinion changes over time.
And listen, if it's a 2, it's probably worth watching because it's got to be like a train wreck, right? But no, I think this is a good one. I definitely recommend you guys watching it. That all being said, we are looking to have you come back next week for The Holdovers, which is another Fan Jan represented film. This is one that was like a holiday film this year. It's pretty new, kind of a newer release. So if you haven't gotten to see it yet and want to see it before we watch it, it is streaming on Peacock, I believe, right?
Yes, it's on Peacock, and it is very much worth watching. Just because it feels like a Christmas film doesn't mean that you can't watch it in January.
Yeah.
So absolutely, if you are looking for a movie with that'll tug at your heartstrings a little bit, I think you should watch this and then listen to next week's episode.
Yeah, definitely. And then we'll have a couple more too, but that'll be next week's. We were also going to be, just a heads up, for February, we will be doing our Oscars month. So come back around for that. Be super exciting. But for now, go have a drink and watch a thing. Cheers.
Cheers.